Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Welcome to our podcast, where we bring you the most inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and experts in the software development industry. Now, each week we interview successful leaders who share their unique journeys and valuable insights. I'm your host, Barry, and today we're lucky enough to have an amazing guest joining us, Carlo Cisco, who is founder and CEO of Select. Hello, Carlo. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
How are you doing today?
Doing great.
Perfect. That's what we'd like to hear. A positive start. So firstly, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak with us. We really appreciate it. But can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and the company that you work at?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the founder and CEO of Select. We're a digital membership and concierge service that connects people to exclusive events, savings, and perks at over 1 million different locations all across the world. So our team went out and built direct relationships with lots of top hotels, restaurants, retailers, entertainment venues, sports teams, really pretty much everything you could think of to design these exclusive, typically significant 15 to 30% off, maybe, free upgrades, drinks, that kind of stuff, or whatever across this entire network. And then to make sure that it's all ongoing so that our members have unlimited access to everything. It's sort of designed for that modern, busy, professional. So yeah, that's what, we've been building at a high level. And then my background really spans a lot of different things, but they all sort of correlate with Select, which is cool. So I started my first business when I was 18. I had an event planning promotion business. I was also a finance major. So ultimately when I graduated, moved up to New York, was working in equity trading, and then actually left that to join Groupon when Groupon was building out in Japan, which was a really incredible experience for a wide number of reasons. And it was sort of each of those experiences that really, kind of like created the idea behind Select. And obviously that's a non-traditional career path. So that's maybe something to note for the audience. But sort of like entrepreneurship, finance, and then at that time, basically the biggest startup on earth, more or less. It was like the hottest company that was, just as Groupon was becoming the fastest growing company in history by revenue. And it's actually still the case, by the way. A lot of people think that's been surpassed, but it hasn't, I believe, at least to my knowledge yet. So really incredible experience there. And that was, maybe the biggest part of the takeaway for Select was, whoa, there's a huge demand for a new way for merchants and customers connect. And I felt like that model didn't really serve premier brands or premier customers very well. So I liked the idea of a membership model instead, something people would have to apply for, be approved for, pay a fee for access to, but then in exchange provided unlimited benefits. And, there's some version of that out there, perhaps. I think a lot of people maybe think their credit cards are versions of this, but the caliber of what you're receiving doesn't really compare. They've all benefited from an industry that just has massive barriers to entry. So they've only needed to minimally innovate for decades.
So you mentioned some of your other achievements there. So just firstly, I'd like to congratulate you on making it to USA Today's top entrepreneurs to follow in 2024. I might add, that's not your only accolade. That's one of many. But how did you feel about that? Was that a surprise or was that expected?
Well, they had to reach out to interview, so I knew that it was, likely coming. But it was really cool. It's not the first time USA Today has covered me or the company, but it was certainly the first time where they've said that. They also said that the company was like, I don't want to get the quote wrong, but something to the extent of redefining the landscape of digital memberships and concierge services. So I certainly really liked that quote. So it was really cool. And that got a lot of attention. Obviously appreciate you bringing it up. I think that, I'm very happy to be covered by them in such a kind way. And hopefully they continue to be nice to us as they cover us.
So was entrepreneurship like always in your blood? Was it something that you knew you were destined to do, or did you just happen across it?
I think that's a great question. And I do think it was always in my blood. So I was raised by my mom and my grandparents were entrepreneurs. And, early on as a kid, I think a lot of people are thinking about like, being baseball players or firemen or whatever. There was a brief period when I was like 3 where I wanted to be a paleontologist. But once I got past that, because I like dinosaurs so much, right? But once I got past that fascination, it was kind of immediately business. I would like draw my world headquarters and stuff like that. So, perhaps I was overly aspirational as a 4, 5, 6 year old. I always knew that I wanted to be in business, and business was what I was interested in, basically business and investing. So it's always been a passion. I maybe didn't know for sure that I would land in entrepreneurship. That sort of first company during school was really kind of happenstance. Someone just noticed that people were like following where I would go at night and asked me to like do an event. And we brought like 600 people to this no name place. So they're like, okay, like then every club owner was calling me pretty much. But so I kind of fell into entrepreneurship, but I always knew business was at the core of what I wanted to do. That's where I felt like my skill set was most applicable.
So you mentioned there the influence of your family and also your friends. How important is networking for an entrepreneur? And is it any less important as your career develops?
It's a great question. That's actually like even like well structured. But I think where it was important was the support element. I wouldn't say necessarily that my family was gung ho. Yes, great. You're going to leave, sort of a successful career path and go start a company. However, they had started a company, so they sort of understood that and could be supportive of that. And the reality with entrepreneurship is, and this is maybe useful for those who don't have as supportive of a family, like if you look at most extremely successful people, what are they? They're entrepreneurs. There's a reason that like every wealth manager, financial advisor, they're keeping tabs on what? Entrepreneurs. Like there's only so many ways to make extreme amounts of money. And of course, like finance is one of them. And, maybe in tech, you can make a kind of extreme amount of money if you're early somewhere, but really it's typically entrepreneurship that's going to move the needle, and it does it for generations, right? If it's in a meaningful way. And I guess the anecdote to that is like, don't focus on money, focus on impact. Like that's really what attracted me to entrepreneurship, not money. If there's lots of easier ways to make money, they're more reliable. So it was useful from that perspective. And then like, my path is interesting because, I grew up in a town with like 5,000 people. So my family had a business, and I was able to, with support and with their support and scholarships, go to some great schools and things like that. But we didn't really have any sort of network to speak of. So I was really kind of doing it from scratch, more or less. There were people from my high school that I knew that were in the city and things like that. But really, I mostly had to build it from scratch, which is a great learning experience for sure. Because you should never think that you can't do something because you don't have the network to do it, because that's simply not true. Especially now, you can like talk to ChatGPT and like, learn a lot of the ins and outs about building a startup. Of course, you can research as well, but maybe ChatGPT is a little faster, and you can apply to accelerators and this kind of stuff. And we did that. We were in Entrepreneurs Roundtable Accelerator very early on in the company. And that was enormously helpful from a network perspective. And I will say being in New York City was helpful from a network perspective also. Now people are a little more flexible about, calls, Zooms, whatever. Like we've definitely closed some very, very big deals where I had never met the person in person until after. But I do think it helps to be in sort of an ecosystem hub, if you will, when you're first starting out, especially. So that's maybe something to know. And then over time, it has gotten a little less important, and it also changes kind of like who you need to meet, who you want to collaborate with. It just shifts. I think early days being around a lot of entrepreneurs is great. Later stages as the company's growing, scaling, maybe you want founders that are a few steps ahead of you because they've done versions of this. They can be useful for intros, et cetera. But then you're also going to want to meet people from large companies. You're going to want to make sure you have really great engineers and stuff like that. So like who you want to be around, I do think shifts over time, and it does become less important as the company grows, because the other thing that happens is people will reach out to the company. I actually made like a comment recently that like some of our best hires had just reached out to the company. There was no position posted or anything like that. And I was highlighting that for people because I know how competitive the job market is right now. And, I think it's being understated in a lot of places, but like if you see a company that you're really passionate about, like you can just reach out to that company and let them know that. And as an employer, it's actually super useful also because you don't want to see just the hundreds of people that apply to every open position. You want to see someone that's genuinely excited about your mission and building your company with you and who can contribute. So it does become easier over time, but it's always important, I would say, and who you need to meet shifts.
Really good information you've given me there. What other qualities, you've been quite modest, but what other qualities do you have that have made you a very successful entrepreneur?
I think there's a bunch. I'll toot my horn a little bit here, I guess. I mean, the thing I'm really bad at is like things that are boring or, like very administrative, kind of stuff. And it comes from like, I have like horrific ADD, very good for some things, not so good for stuff like that, right? If it's really boring, like all my worst grades in school were supposed to be the easiest classes. It was the hard classes where I was getting really good grades. And like in some cases, literally setting the curve for the class because I like to be challenged. So that's one personality trait that's a little unique versus others that helps quite a bit with entrepreneurship is like liking to be challenged. Not that many people really have that mindset. And, perhaps the penultimate example of this is the COVID pandemic. At that time, most of what we did was like restaurants, hotels, events, entertainment. Everyone's like, were you scared? And we had like deal huntery kind of M&A offers. And I was like, no, I like being challenged. And, like ultimately that year, like our member renewal rate actually went up. We made a lot of very fast innovations. Like I do very well when there's sort of like a back against a wall, this shouldn't work kind of situation. And the same is true for, if you're trying to get something that hasn't been done before, like we're going to introduce a credit card and I got that approved for like the highest consumer credit tier, which helps determine interchange and rewards and a few other things. And we were the first company that was new that had ever done that. But I like that because that's challenging, right? So it's kind of fun for me. So appreciating a challenge and enjoying a challenge is maybe part of it. I do think I'm fairly creative and have a pretty good understanding of users, and users could be businesses or customers. Someone can throw like almost any situation at me and I'll be like, okay, like, like this is where I think it's most interesting for everybody and like where there's the most mutually beneficial fit or whatever. Pretty good with that kind of stuff as well. And then leadership, to an extent, and maybe that's like a learned skill, perhaps like, over periods of time of having people, but, certainly like motivating employees, rallying them around a mission, keeping everyone excited, on the journey. Like those are all difficult things and things that I've done pretty well that with. People can see that in the sort of retention of employees at Select. And so I think like kind of general leadership skills as well. And then I'm like pretty good at marketing or deal making and that kind of stuff. But I think it's, just like raw determination and sort of, creativity and work ethic maybe are the things that are the strongest, combined with over time learning how to motivate and manage teams.
That's quite an impressive array of skills that you've managed to accumulate. Do you have to be able to wear many hats in your role, or do you like to be more of a specialist?
I certainly have to wear many hats. I think that's typically the case with entrepreneurship. Over time, you might be able to sort of like, and you should, this is probably something I should do a little better, kind of like offload core responsibility, right? But what I generally find is that I should kind of lead every different initiative and then make sure I have the right people to entrust with the management and oversight and development of said initiative. And we definitely have that across a lot of areas of the company. But if I'm, pretty close to leading just about everything, then I have to be able to like jump from like talking to a Fortune 100 bank to, talking to a restaurant or a hotel or one of our members or setting up an event or helping someone with health insurance or whatever. Like it's just a wide array of stuff that like your brain needs to be able to jump around and do. And, thankfully to some extent, right, could have gotten much better grades in school if I didn't have ADD, but like it actually to some extent like helps with that, right? Because it's like, oh, cool, challenge, great, let's go.
So, like in terms of like competition, what actually makes you stand out from the marketplace? What's unique about you?
Yeah. It's interesting because there's almost like two kind of like core sets of competitors. There's Premier credit cards, I would say are a competitive set, even though we don't have a credit card yet. Like sort of a lot of like the functions and benefits and expectations. Those are things that people will typically associate with a card. And they're sort of like digital memberships. And there's not that many of those left. I think there's, Founders Card, us, you could maybe consider a Velocity Black one that's really more of like a focus on a concierge or that sort of thing. But there's a few things that set us apart. Number one is the network of benefits. And I remember in the early days of building this out, and we had traction and proof points, so people wouldn't, question the model too much. But, a lot of like VCs or like large companies would be like, this can't be done. And I'm like, what do you mean it can't be done? Like, that's a really stupid like way of looking at something. I think it can be done. We're in the beginning stages of doing it. Watch me do it, and what the reason for that is just that it's, we have to understand the goal of Select, like the mission of Select, if you will, is to like improve the lives of our members by improving the way businesses and customers connect, right? So like if we're going to deliver properly on that mission, we more or less have to understand the ins and outs of every single industry that our members are interested in for businesses. And not a lot of people can do that. Understand what's different for a restaurant versus a retail brand versus a business service versus a hotel. Like there's a lot of expertise that gets developed there, and sort of what's been normal culture, and this is true across both sets, is if they're innovating at all. And I'll give Amex maybe the biggest nod for innovating in the card space, although it's pretty nominal. Sorry, Amex. But they have, like unique hotel benefits that are cool. They've like done some stuff that's at least interesting and valuable to people. Capital One is doing more of that now, but like they're not getting involved in restaurants much past Resi, some platform they acquired to make reservations. Like you can make reservations, just call and be persistent, and it'll work out better than Resi, frankly. And then on the membership side, probably the one that deserves a bit more of a nod is Founders Card. They're much older than us. I think they started around 2008, 2007, and I'm sure there were versions that way preceded them as well. But of like the market current examples, they, in my opinion, kind of were the first ones to deliver well on this idea of like meaningful benefits for whatever we want to call an exclusive or curated group of members. And their idea was to like bring what was, available maybe to corporate executives to founders. Obviously now it casts across everyone. And frankly, they took it quite a bit further than the companies did. And then we took it like 10 times further than that, basically. Like they perhaps focused a bit more on member acquisition, where perhaps we focused a bit more on product. For example, if someone asked what the differences are, well, there's no dining benefits on Founders Card. That's about 30% of what members use Select for our hotel program. And bear in mind that they've been building there since 2007, 2008. We started in 2015, is about 50 to 100 times the size of theirs. So it's quite a bit larger and often has better benefits. Not always. There's going to be some rare instances somewhere where they might have a better benefit. And then and then everything else, we've got like the concierge built in with normal membership. We've got more frequent member events. And we also, I would say, have much more robust technology. Like a lot of it isn't even in use yet, but we've got like travel itinerary planners and like, like we have a human concierge team, but we also have this S thing that we created that's helping non-members quite a bit right now. So like we're always, I guess, looking to knock the puck further and further and further. And we feel, or I feel, and I think everyone on our team feels that like companies, like the achievement of a goal, even if we think we're the best in market today, like we're not going to sit around because of that. We're always looking at how do we get better? How do we improve people's lives more? How do we stay light years ahead of everybody else in the space? And I think that's part of what has helped us, be so far ahead in this space. And it's true versus the credit cards too, just to like a greater extent. But I do need to give Amex a nod on hotels because I think they did that really well and understood. And this is like a newer thing for us, this idea of like, it's not just about the rate, it's about the experience. We've always had a mixture of like unpublished rates and cash back and some that are more of that, room upgrade, free check-in, like all, breakfast credit and all that kind of stuff. But we introduced like a version of that now that's more significant, and it's been very popular with members, and that was inspired by them. Frankly, I kept like hearing about fine hotels and resorts, so I was like, this is annoying. Like we should just have this as a part of Select. We don't want to lose the unpublished rates and everything because that's very popular members. And we created a program that's like twice the size of theirs now. So it just like comes back to driving it further, taking it further. And then you build a lot of good relationships too. So that becomes like a pretty big strategic advantage as well. So yeah, that's where I would say holistically, we're a bit better is like, you're most likely going to get way more value from Select, and Select is going to get you across a wider reach of like both savings and experiences. And often those two things are combined.
So when you are like a market leader and, you're always ahead, is that kind of a danger of some complacency? Sometimes it might be better to be like second because you always know what you're chasing and how to catch up. What's your thoughts?
I think it's a fair question because I think, like where we're ahead is product, where maybe we've been a little complacent is growth. And it's not like we're not growing quickly. Like the membership grew 50% last year, revenue grew about 70% last year. But like for the whole first half of the year, honestly, between you and I, like we weren't really like even focusing on growth, and that's maybe something where we got a little complacent. And it's great to have the absolute best for now, at least, and hopefully in perpetuity product. But you also have to make sure you're bringing people to that product. And I think there is a risk of complacency. I don't think we'll ever see that on the product side, just the way I've trained the team. I've created a culture around really improving people's lives. Like, even on something like a concierge, right? Which people are like, how differentiated could that be? People tell us we're better than Centurion, Velocity Black, when it's all the time. And those are services that cost multiples more than Select does, but it's like embedded in our DNA to like do really well for the member. And this year, and this has really been like the main initiative, honestly, of the first part of the year, beyond rolling out this new hotels program and a few other things, is almost like recalibrating the company for growth, which sounds funny when you've got numbers that are like maybe sounding like good growth numbers to people. But the reality is, if we're the best, we should get into a lot more people's hands and improve a lot more people's lives. And it's equally as important as creating the best products. So like most of our recent hires have been around growth kind of hires. We didn't have like anyone helping me with marketing for a while. We didn't have like a B2B person, but we have publicly traded B2B clients, right? Like they sought us out because of the product. But there's a lot of missed opportunity by being a little too casual on that front that is now being corrected.
And just on that, the future, obviously you don't have a crystal ball, no one does, but are you like quietly optimistic? What's your thoughts on the markets and where it's going at the moment?
So I think it's interesting for sure. And, something I didn't mention in the background is part of why I ended up in finance is I had done really well investing in companies while I was in school. My very first investment was in 2005. I emptied my entire savings account, put it into Apple. And then I did a bunch of things, even some things that outperformed that, if you can believe it, with the proceeds from the events company. So I know a little bit about understanding companies and markets and people. These are like amongst my skill sets. I tend to be a little doom and gloom with jobs. I just think that the AI tools that are available now are light years ahead of what people expected, and they're going to get much, much, much better. There's a natural inertia with it. I know people that are heads of AI at publicly traded companies, and I'll talk to them about ChatGPT, and they'll be like, I didn't know it could do that. It's like, yeah. So like eventually, like there's not going to be as much of that, right? People are going to wake up, they will have tried more things with it. So I'm, concerned a bit about jobs because but where I'm optimistic, I guess, is, and I was just having this discussion with someone else, like I do think productivity and sort of like GDP and that sort of thing, like I think those are all actually headed in a positive direction. Like I know some people that are like, why isn't the market going down? And like one of them had sent me an article, and within the article, it was like the Magnificent Seven grew, which are like the seven of the largest technology companies for those who are unfamiliar, grew earnings 35% year over year, which is very large when you're already that big. But then the entire rest of the S&P was down 9%, right? And this is sort of what I've been saying to people is like, there's no like big up or down move coming. It's just different. There's certain companies that realistically will benefit from these changes where they can be early adopters, where they have enough specialization in their specific niche that they can't like completely be replaced and that sort of thing. So I guess I've overall got some level of optimism though, because I also think that like maybe to some level it's needed. Everyone being on all the time, 24/7, the way that technology is kind of enabled is perhaps not good for us, and having like a little time for personal relationships and family and such like that could be good. And perhaps like, as these AI things get more sophisticated and more productive, like, yeah, perhaps we don't need as many workers. We definitely won't, in fact. But maybe we also don't need to like work the same kind of insane, crazy hours because it's there to help us. And something it does do is it makes things like entrepreneurship, for example, way easier. I was taking an Uber back from Miami the other day, and my Uber driver had been talking to ChatGPT, and he knew all the stuff. And so when I mentioned that earlier, lightly, like there's many real life examples of that. Like now, if you want to learn and you want to create, there's platforms that are going to make that easier than ever, and you can't like democratize something like entrepreneurship completely, but they'll take a very large step towards that. So I think there's a lot to be excited about. I think there's definitely things to be cautious about. I think people are a little overly cautious with some of these very human intensive jobs. Like when you see these robots like break an egg or whatever, it's like, okay, well, how much is it going to cost? And also like, how long is it going to take for that to be as sophisticated as a human? It's going to take a very long time. But the flip side of that is like, give ChatGPT a company's lifetime financials and ask it to do analysis on it. It's going to do it in 2 minutes, and it's going to be more accurate than anybody. And the same is true for law. Same is true for wide. So it's just going to change significantly. And I think you just got to be paying attention and basically and be smart.
Perfect. And unfortunately, we're coming to the end of this podcast, which is always a shame because I was enjoying that conversation with you. But I just want to thank you again for talking with me today. It has been my pleasure to have you here.
Oh, Matt, thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to talk about entrepreneurship and business and market trends. These are my favorite topics.
Thank you so much again. That was Carlo Cisco, founder and CEO of Select.